speaker. He is a commercially focused MBA director at the University of Chester, bringing over 10 years experience in the United Kingdom higher education sector. He is highly analytical with a proven track record in income generation through program development and overseas student recruitment. He is a Chartered Institute of Marketing Examiner, a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy, and a certified management business educator, CMBE. He specializes in quality assurance, postgraduate and undergraduate programs management with extensive management experience of overseas partnership in Asian markets. He's developed a substantial portfolio of external institutional approvals, course validations, and examinership, as well as delivered a number of consultancy and enterprise projects. Edves Catalyst 2022, if you're signed it, please let me put your words together as a welcome all the way from the United Kingdom, University of Chester, Tao Chang. Please a round of applause. Thank you very much. Come on, keep clapping until he gets on stage. Keep clapping until he gets on stage. Thank you, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Yeah, it's my first time coming to Africa. Yeah, it's my first time coming to Nigeria. It's also my first time coming to Lagos. I hope you're going to enjoy the session, okay? If it's turned out to be too boring, please do let me know, okay? Nice to see everybody. I've been given a couple of questions from yesterday. Obviously, there are some questions that I wasn't able to manage to answer them yesterday. So the first question, which is, please explain the different school leadership structure. Yesterday, I was talking about the need in private sector that there needs to be a more flat, hierarchical structure. Because one of the things, with all level of education, once a school is getting too hierarchical, decision-making tend to be slower, and children needs may not be met at the appropriate time, in time for their development. So this question is asking me about the school leadership structure. I can only talk about United Kingdom with my experience in the school, because my son goes to a school, so I do know what's happening. Generally speaking, the government will collect taxation, and then they will spend X amount of money on each pupil in the school. The difference is if your child goes to a private school, you pay more, but that requires a lot of high tax percentage for the school being able to implement the structure. And generally speaking, in the private school in the UK, there is a head teacher, and then there is a classroom teacher in every level, and then there's deputy head, as well as their specific support officers. For example, in the UK, many children have special needs. So if they have a special needs, generally speaking, that comes through somebody called Sanko, which is a special needs, support worker. Their job is to make sure that the children with special needs, they're well looked after. And if you have additional needs, generally speaking, it will be assessed by the local authority. There is something called the EHCP, which is Education Health Care Plan. Under the Education Health Care Plan, the school is obliged to get X amount of funding from the government. They will be able to support the children with special needs. The reason why I want to talk about the special needs is because when I was doing research, for Nigeria, or generally speaking in Africa, I can see there's support available, but I'm not sure I found any information about the legalized document, to government have to be obliged to support the special needs children with adequate funding. But that's not an Africa-specific problem. Around the whole world, we know now there's a cost of living crisis, there's inflation going high, there's a Russia-Ukraine war, there's a whole bunch of things, public sector as well as the private sector have to deal with unprecedented, challenges. In terms of the second question, talking about the paying teachers in Nigeria is a great challenge as cost of living is becoming unbearable. How will the low-cost school maintain the standards? Well, like anything else, there's always the quality, the cost, okay? And if you don't get enough funding from the public sector, from the government, you will have to work on the basis of low-cost provider. So there is a model, these graduates, they do their early years education in a university, and they could be employed to support these low-cost schools. But then some people argue, but what about the quality? The quality may not be there. That's why the private school have to work on the model where you find either quality teacher, you keep a limited number of them, and when you expand, getting the children, you will be able to expand your pool of choice, for qualified teachers. There is also a need, yesterday I was talking about the importance of the remuneration, or we call it the motivation package. Because if the teacher don't feel they can put the food on the table, it's really difficult for them to do well in their school. And therefore, if you can't pay your teacher a good salary, you may be able to compensate them with further study opportunities. At least they feel the employer are looking after them. So I hope I have answered these questions. Of course, we all know about the government influence on these matters, but we're not here talking about from a government perspective. Let's focus on what individual school could do. Is that okay? Yeah. I'm going to look at my slides. That's not my first slide. Okay. So I've looked at the McKinsey report 2022 this year. Okay. So with all the COVID, learning, and then there's blended learning, there's various problems with cost of living. We said that, we also talk about inflation. We'll talk about around the whole world, there is a crisis, okay? So there is a need for flexibility and speed. So this means that if all the school, the parents are asking how well the children are doing in the school, there need to be a system to check the record, okay? Because some of the schools, when parents are asking a progress or retention or assessment, how well their children are doing, maybe one colleague, said, well, I can get back to you. But if there's no system in place to check whether the colleague, the staff, have delivered what they promised the parents, then there's going to be a problem. Therefore, it's really important the system is in place. I've also looked at the built-in adaptability and agility. Speed is really, really important because these days, the parents sending their children to private sector, they're normally middle class above. They pay more money, and they demand more. This means that if the school do not deliver the service to meet parents' expectation, there will be all sorts of problems, and sometimes you may have to spend more time dealing with the problem than delivering the actual education. In strategic management, we always talk about, whether you want to look at the business issue from a resource-based view. In other words, you look at how many staff you've got and what are their expertise, and you can look at, how you're going to improve the structure by putting the right people at the right place to deliver education. Now, There are other models available. If we don't look at the resource-based view, there are schools, they recruit, getting a lot more students. Then they go out and looking for these resources. So throughout all levels of education, there's always a mismatch. If you have enough students, the children, you may not have enough staff. If you have enough staff, you may not have the quality staff you need. Therefore, there is always a conflict how you're going to strike the balance. So some people believe, well, let's look at the quality first. So that's why you have a lot of overseas schools, coming to Nigeria. They set up British international schools and all these other schools, and the idea is they can charge premier price for what they're delivering. But generally speaking, after you've been to a country, for a few years, no matter it's Nigeria or Kenya or anywhere, that there is always a renegotiation about the business model, because private school, many of them will want to survive first before they can talk about profit. Therefore, what we need to change is we need to make sure that whatever we do, whether it's a public sector school and private sector school, the children should not suffer as a result. Because at the end of the day, the only way to lift the people out of poverty is through education, okay? And then many people, they will have to think hard, when running business. Do you prioritize profit? And most companies will tell you, yes, we need to pay our staff. Yes, that's no problem. But don't forget, that the difference being education is to make a difference in other people's life. And that is really the key, okay? So there's some other aspect about, if we have another pandemic, if you want to be able to deliver face-to-face anymore, what are you going to do? So there is the uncertainty, there is the organization need to be flexible, and we have to think about the supply chain, because not just business talk about supply chain. Even with education, think about it, where you source your teachers, how committed they are, okay? And I do think that when anybody, whether public or private schools, they have to find out the motivation for somebody to be, wanting to be in the education sector. If I'm not suggesting money is not important, okay? But certainly that trying to change people's life, is the key for somebody can stay in education for a long time, okay? Right. Hold on. I'm going to talk about the digital software in schools, okay? So with a lot of UK schools, there's various apps. There's parent mail. There's also where the parents and the teaching staff can upload photos. You can check their progress. You can organize the evening parents, evening appointment with teachers. So all of these are recorded, The reason why I'm saying this is the way forward is because it is still cheaper to buy software than employ everybody and too many staff when you don't need, okay? There are schools, they provide the full scheme of employment. They're saying, well, if we give everybody a job, that's going to work. But that's okay. 10 years ago, that's fine. But now think about it. If we have another public health crisis, it may not be COVID, it may be something else. We don't know. What are you going to do? Because people won't be allowed to come into work. You have to rely on systems where you can see all the statistics. And also, it's going to make your business really valuable because you're going to comply with the government regulation, monitoring the pupil attendance, looking at their progress. You can look at all sorts of development needs for the children. So that's why it's important, I think, everybody in the right place, and looking at the importance of digital software. I want to look at the resilience for all the challenging business landscape. So we know about, just now we talk about the COVID pandemic challenge, and now seems our continent trying to do better. There is the need for workforce to be available, and workforce availability is always a problem, no matter you work in the public sector or private sector. People tend to leave, and they want to make their progression, they want to leave. So it's not an Africa-specific problem. And many, many education institutions, they do have people moving on, and then the space needs to be refilled, and that's where you see you may not have qualified workforce available, okay? But, as I said before, okay, there is a need now in the school, challenges as well as the emerging issues. In other words, what I'm trying to say is we cannot run education in the old way anymore, okay? 1990 is gone, 1980 is gone, 2010 is gone, now we're in the era of 2022. It's all about flexibility and changing your business model, getting the right people on board. So, okay. So history shows in time of disruption, resilience depends on adaptability and decisiveness. How can the leaders in the school actually meet these challenges? What should education leader do? Okay, we have public sector as well as private sector need to take a broader view of resilience agenda. Okay, so what happened is on the government level, if we look at across the globe, okay, we have this problem about government, they work in isolation and they don't look at resilience agenda across the board. The only good example is about the European Union. The European Union, European Commission, they started a recovery plan for Europe. So what they're trying to do is making sure that all the European Commission members, they're working together, they're trying to implement resilience agenda across the whole Europe. Now, what we can do here in Africa, on the government level, surely the government leaders, they can work on the resilience agenda. In the school, for each individual, private school, public school, there needs to be resilience program written as part of the staff training. If your school is not doing any resilience program, you need to start to think about it. Because there are various scenarios you can look at from how other schools across the globe are doing. We have this sustainable, inclusive, growing solution beyond the improving business economic performance. So at the end of the day, it's all about making sure the livelihoods and the people do not feel their section of community being marginalized. And that is what many people are looking at the moment in Africa, how to improve education standard quality across the whole continent. Okay, now, this is, yeah, I have one more slide. Right, so what should the school do? Anybody have a volunteer? I want to pick a couple of brains, you know. If you can tell me, in your school, if you asked to produce a resilience program in your school, what would you do? Any volunteer? Blessed are those who come forward. Yes, blessed are those who come forward. Is there anybody brave enough? Yes?
Good morning, everyone. I think one of the things that I would consider, I mean, I work with schools as a consultant. One of the things I would consider in terms of building resilience would be adaptability to change. Because resilience indicates that you will encounter unforeseen circumstances, and you would need to quickly adapt, pivot, or evolve to be able to meet those. So one of the things that I would then encourage schools to do is build in their staff that capacity to adapt to change so that they're able to pivot and evolve when unforeseen circumstances come. Yeah.
Is there any particular training program you think if you ask to put a program together, you're going to say, well, I need all these elements in the training program?
So like I said, adaptability to change. I think also risk assessment. So already begin to think about the gaps or the things that a school might encounter.
Yeah.
And obviously one of the things is public health crisis, as you mentioned. I mean, when the pandemic came, it was something that we would never have imagined could happen. And it's sort of, trying to feed off things like that. And as a school saying, what if we have another public health crisis? What if we have a fire at school? What if, so it's what ifs and then doing scenario planning. So risk assessment, adaptability to change, risk assessment.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned that already.
Yeah.
So I've done three. Maybe somebody else
brilliant.
can suggest.
That's brilliant. But at the same time, you also got to look at the political environment, economic environment, the social cultural environment, as well as technological environment. Because if we do have another public crisis, going digital is the only way going to help schools, transform students' lives. So yes.
My name is Ayode Dadewale. I'm from Temple School. My perception to this is that the first thing I think we should have is that we should be able to help people to picture the end result of their adjustment and preparation for the challenges. I teach art, for example, sometimes I teach photography. The world is changing in the field of art from analog to digital. One of the first things I think schools should do is that let the teacher be prepared for the modern day challenge in the field. So that prevention we have similar experience that we had during the COVID. I can stay here and be teaching somebody in Canada or somebody in Japan. Not talk of Nigeria environment. That is work. Two is that, do I have a future after making the contribution? I must see myself as having future. Because there are two parts to relationship. That's why we talk about mutual respect. The part of the employer and the part of the employee. They both must play their part for the betterment of the society and the institution of learning at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So there is really a need to build a national culture, really. Okay? And the national culture can only be built if all the schools are working together, trying to push the same agenda through. Okay? Is somebody else want to talk, or yes?
Sorry, I was just going to add, recently there were some master's students who they were trying to teach them how to remember things. And what they did was a lot of role playing. They recorded things. In this environment, sometimes we're very defensive because we don't see what we're doing. So I think part of the resilience training is that we do a lot of role playing and we see ourselves and we analyze and we see the disadvantages of not changing.
Yeah.
And most importantly as well, we write a lot of policies, but we do not train our staff on the policies. And I think there should be a resilience policy because, like you said, it's COVID today, it could be something else tomorrow. And we should just learn to just pivot from from learning physically to also learning online. And we should not just close all our systems because the world could change anytime.
Yes. Thank you so much. And just by the way, just in case people don't know, I teach Dimiji, okay? Dimiji is one of my students. Yeah. Okay? And I'm very proud I can come here to support him, to at least share what I know with the people, education sector. Let's all improve everything, and we'll have a long time, to work together. And I like the idea what Dimiji is doing. Thank you so much for listening.
If that's all the round of applause you can give for the wealth of knowledge you just shared with us.